Ali Wentworth had one of the scene-stealing appearances on television this season with her role as a very interesting gynecologist, Dr. Saperstein, on the final season of Will and Grace. I'm Tony Ruiz from Gold Derby. And Ali, let's just start at the beginning. How did this particular part come to you?
This particular part, first of all, let me just say, I'm a huge fan of Will and Grace. So this was kind of a dream come true. And Max Muchnick, one of the creators of Will and Grace, he called me and said, I've got this part we're writing, and I think you'd be great for it. And I said, what is it? He said, it's a gynecologist. And I said, done. And I sort of like that she's incredibly neurotic and has no boundaries. So it was just so much fun to play.
And how, so when you come into a show, when you do a guest shot on a show, so where do you start in terms of like building that character? Do you just go based on the script and then just run with it? Do you get to collaborate at all on it?
Well, yes. I usually, when I guest star, they let me play. In this particular situation, Deborah Messing happens to be one of my best friends. And I know Sean Hayes, and I know Eric McCormick, and I know Megan Mullally. So there was already a comfort level when I went in that I could sort of play and have fun. And one of the things that I just sort of added in rehearsal, which I really liked, and Jimmy Burroughs, the director, really liked, was this idea of this character who's screaming at her cheating husband 1 second, and then she has to kind of change how she is with her patient. And so I came up with the hi, which is her way of sort of soothing herself in the situation. So anyway, but for me going in there, I just knew those guys. So I was ready and free and game to kind of play as much as I can. Whereas other guest stars, when I was Schmoopy on Seinfeld in the Suit Nazi, I'd never met Jerry before. I mean, this is 150 years ago. I had never met Jerry before. And one of the first scenes, we had to make out. So that was a lot more intimidating because I didn't know if I could play. I didn't know what I could do. All I did was like brush my teeth and pack my mouth full of Tic Tacs. But this was a lot easier, Will and Grace.
And so, again, it's amazing how in such a short, amount of time, you get this totally, three-dimensional character. Was there one aspect, because on one hand you're playing the very, supportive doctor, and then you've got the screaming, and then probably the physical comedy highlight is you just weeping as you're examining Deborah Messing. Yeah, well, I wanted you to say it, not me. So
yeah.
How were you able to keep a straight face as you were doing it? Were you able to do it without breaking?
Well, the great thing about doing a half-hour comedy is you get to rehearse for a few days. So it wasn't, Deborah and I were cracking up the whole time rehearsing, but also I got all of that stuff out of the way, meaning I was being incredibly perverse and silly while we rehearsed, but kept the idea of sort of doing the exam and then breaking down and crying. Of course, any gynecologist doing an exam does not put the cloth over her head like that. So, I got to play with that, but I just love the idea that I would be in the most vulnerable position with this patient, and then I would make it about me and start hysterically crying. And Deborah played it beautifully. She's kind of like petting my head. She doesn't know how to deal with it. So that was good fun. But believe me, if you had watched rehearsals, it was like it couldn't have been bluer.
Well, I've been to several tapings of Will and Grace, and you talk about Jim Burroughs, who is such kind of like an icon of television. Had you worked with Jim before, and what was that experience like?
I had never worked with him before. I was incredibly intimidated because I have so many friends that have done shows with him over the years. And for me, getting his approval was huge. And so the first day of rehearsal, and when I started playing with the hi, he would say, like, "That's great, Wentworth," or he'd say, "Look at Wentworth, a comedy star," and that was it. I was completely at ease. You know, I had that to me was like more bigger than any accolades I could have gotten from anybody else. I mean, you know, even my own family, like, "You're really funny." It's like Jimmy Burroughs, he grounds me that day. So and he's, you know, he's an amazing guy. It's just instinctual for him. And so when you think of something and you do something that Jimmy Burroughs didn't think of or thinks is really funny, you're the king of the world.
Does it, you know, because you've done both, you've done kind of your share over the course of your career of single camera comedy and multicam comedy. Do you prefer one or over the other?
100%. I love an audience. I love an audience so much. I love all the energy that comes from having, you know, real people there. And especially when you do comedy, when you do single camera comedy, you do a lot more takes and there's no audience and the crew members can't laugh because it's not like they're going to add a laugh track. So you're constantly walking around going, "Was that funny? Was that funny? Could that be funnier?" But when you have an audience crack up, or there was a couple times when in this guest appearance at Will and Grace where we had to wait because they were laughing so hard, there's nothing better. And all it does is it fuels your creativity and adrenalism and makes you funnier. And obviously, sadly, what you can't see is before we would do a new take or something, me and Deborah were totally playing with the audience. And to me, that's half the fun.
So I mean, when you look at your career, you know, you have done so much comedy. You've done your fair share of drama as well. People always say that comedy is easier than drama. Do you buy that, or are you on that train of comedy being harder than drama?
I don't buy that. I don't buy that because I think comedy is a lot more instinctual. So you either sort of feel it, have it, or you don't. And it's one of these things where young actors that want to get into comedy, I always say, you don't need to take 100 acting classes. You know, you feel it. You know, obviously I've never done stand-up, but a lot of stand-up comedians, I just say, go do your set, you know, or go join the Groundlings or an improv group. Doing drama to me is really hard because I always feel like I'm faking it. And it's funny because my best friend, Mariska Hargitay, is on Law and Order SVU, and it's, you know, that's heavy drama. And she sees what I do and she's like, "Oh God, that's so hard." And I see what she does and I go, "Oh my God, that's so hard. I could never do that." Learn all those lines. But so, you know, I think they're both hard, but I think comedy is harder to teach.
I was just about to steal a line from Inside the Actor Studio. Can comedy be taught? But then you just answered that. You know, so when you get these opportunities, what process do you use to decide on, yeah, I'm going to do this, or maybe no, this isn't for me?
You know, first it comes down to the show. Is it a show that I know? Is it a show that I love? And so obviously the Seinfelds and the Will and Graces, and even I did a little thing on SVU, but that was just to run around and chase Mariska. But the first thing is the show. The second thing is the character. I've done guest stars on like Search Party and shows that I wasn't familiar with, but the character was a drunk crazy person. So that was, and that was fun for me. And I played the role as somebody that was drunk that was trying to unwrap a piece of gum the whole time she's kind of monologuing. So we looked for something different and challenging. And I remember I did a guest spot on Blue Bloods, and I was like, I don't want to be a cop, or I don't. And they said, no, this is a character who's really lonely, and she's always calling the cops. And it was a funny character. I mean, they had me like in lingerie, drinking a glass of red wine, constantly calling the cops, thinking I was seeing things that were illegal that weren't there. So, then you go, what's fun about playing this? I've been offered kind of lawyer roles and stuff like that, and or 1 hour procedurals, and it's just not my thing.
So it's interesting because as we're recording this, it's the day after the Will and Grace finale, and not only through your friendship with Deborah, but you also have done talks at the 92nd Street Y with the cast. So this is a show that clearly you're familiar with on a lot of levels. What do you think now that the show has gone? What do you think the legacy of this show is?
I think the legacy of Will and Grace is it was groundbreaking because they had a gay character that was a lead in a show, and it was hilariously funny. It was a extremely funny show. And it dealt with 4 very different, intricate, complicated characters. One of my favorite moments or memories of Will and Grace was I was pregnant and on bed rest with my second daughter. And I had my 3-year-old sitting next to me in bed, and I was watching TV, and I was watching Will and Grace because it was my favorite show. And we're watching, and all of a sudden, Eric McCormick and Sean Hayes, their characters come into a bar. They're in Vermont. And the bartender says, "What can I get you?" And they both say in unison, "George Stephanopoulos." And I dropped my lemonade, and my 3-year-old said, "Why do they want daddy?" And I was like, "How do I hate this?" I said, "Because he's really smart." But it was one of those great moments in my life where I was watching the show I love. They used my husband as a joke, and then my 3-year-old had to have the joke explained to her. It was like, I'll never forget it.
Well, it was just one of the absolute funniest scenes. Just those scenes with you this season was just an absolute treasure. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys. And Ali Wentworth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And best of luck to you.
Thank you so much.